What does Memorial Day mean to you? You ever think about that? I think we ought to want to remember the ones that fought and died for us. You know, I've heard the old saying all my life, nothing in the world is free. And our freedom sure wasn't free. Someone had to pay the price for us to be free. And I wonder have we forgot how many lives were lost so we could be free. I have seen 4 different wars in my time. I've seen the World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War, and the war on terrorism, Iraq and Afghanistan. Every one of those wars that's been fought, even on our side, they were fought for freedom. That's why they fought. It seems like we forget how many people has died so that we can be free. Do we sometimes take our freedom for granted? It's this thing that we have. Do we sometimes think freedom just happened? Just happened. We live in the United States and we got freedom. Do we sometimes think freedom just happened to the ones that lived in America? We are free to worship, and that could be taken away. The way things is going now, it should be taken away. There are so many families all over America that has been affected by war. Families have lost sons and daughters, and they are some that was wounded, that carry the scars of war all their life. We should thank all the mothers and fathers who had lost sons and daughters in wars. I have never done anything that affected me like this did. Paul Davis, he helped me out. He looked up all the details on that computer. And I think somehow if everybody can get a copy, get somebody to get this for you, and just sit down and read what all they went through and how many people lost their lives for us. I have, well, like I said, the boys that were drafted in the Army, especially in World War II, they were just ordinary 18-year-old boys. And they growed up overnight when they were drafted. They growed up overnight. They were men who grew up not far away from home. They never had been out far like we go now. They'd pretty well been around home all their life. They was just all at once just jerked up, and they was in the Army. For some, the war never ended with the fighting stopped, when the fighting stopped. We worked for a man that was in the Army, and he was in his 80s. He was still fighting the war. That the war had ended 50 years before this, but he was still in there. He thought, in his mind, he was still fighting the war. He would run around the house and hollering, "Get them boys out of that water. Get them boys out of that water." And that's part of war. That's part of war. That man, I know he didn't have much life after that. I come from a large family, just like a lot of you done. We was raised all here in Gibson County. But there was family all over the United States, just like ours. They were, first thing you know, all their kids were jerked up and sent off to war. I came from a family that had 2 girls and 5 boys. My dad and all 5 of us boys was in the military. I had 2 sisters. One of them married a guy that was in World War II. One of them married a guy that was in the Korean War. So out of 12 men, there was 12 of us in the military. My oldest brother was drafted into the Army in 1942. And when he finished basic training, he got 5 days at home. And we never seen him again till 1945, when the war was over. My second brother was in the Navy. He was on a hospital ship in the Pacific. He told me one time of all the things that bothered him. It was when someone died, they would wrap him in an American flag and bury him at sea. Think about it, if he was your boy, you'd never see him dead or alive again. He was just gone. My third brother was drafted in 1945, and the war was over by the time he got out of basic training, so he was pretty lucky. My fourth brother joined the Air Force in 1948. The war started in 1950, and it wasn't long till he was in Korea. Now it's my turn. I joined the Air Force January 6, 1954. I went to Lackland Air Force Base, Texas, where I got basic training. Then I was transferred to Tyndall Air Force Base, Panama City, Florida. And from there, I went to Korea, K-14 Kimpo Air Force Base, Korea. There were things when I was in Korea that I wished I was home. Martin, every day I was there, I guess I wished I was at home. But now that all that's over and behind, I sure got a honor of just serving my country for a while. I know I didn't do much, but what little I've done, I'm sure proud of it now. World War II. World War II started in 1941 and ended August 19, 1945. There was not a person nowhere around, and some of you that's old enough to remember, everybody was had something happen and was bothered something about World War II. Everybody around, every family was hit by World War II. World War II was a war that some people said that it's a war that will end all wars, but it wasn't, was it? General Douglas MacArthur, he made the statement, I know all of you have heard, war is hell. And I believe he was right. Back during that time, what things we bought was rationed. If you had a car, you couldn't buy car tires. There were things of all kinds that you used every day, like sugar and this and that and other, you couldn't buy. The Milan Arsenal was running 24/7. It hadn't been built long, and they had buses running from all towns over West Tennessee, the people working at the Milan Arsenal. Most of the men were farmers that were drafted. And at that time, they'd been plowing mules all their life. And the first thing they knew, they were soldiers. As I read facts about this war, there was a few good ones, very few, and there was a whole gang of bad things. In World War II, there were 405,399 American men killed in that one war. Between June the 6th, 1944, and to May 8, 1945, in Europe, 200,000 of our allies and 500 was killed, and 550,000 were wounded. Japan trained their men to fight at age 9. When you was a kid was 9 years old, they would train them how to fight. The Russians saw more men, more people killed in World War II than any other country. There were 14 million that was killed. 80% of the Russians that were born after 1923 did not survive the war. The Holocaust saw the death of 6 million Jews. And this was a bad part I read. It said 1 million children was killed during that war. I'm sure most of you have heard of the Battle of the Bulge. That's where the most soldiers was killed in all the war. There was 80,000 Americans killed in that one battle. Think about it. 80,000. There were too many things that was in this that ain't no way you could done them all. But I was 5 to 10 years old when World War II happened. I can remember just like it was yesterday. My daddy had an old radio that would run off of a battery. We didn't have electricity then. And he wouldn't let us listen to nothing over that radio because he wanted it at 6 o'clock when the news come up. He would sit there and listen to that news. And again, some of you older one probably remember this. News had come on every night. It was Walter Winchell. Says, good evening, Mr. and Mrs. North America and all the ships at sea. I heard that for 4 or 5 years. And my mother, she would sit there, and at that time, she had 3 boys in the military. 2 of them was in war zone. She would sit there and she'd worry about her boys. If they was alive, if they was all right. She worried about them. And here at Whitehall, we got 2 men, field members here, that was in World War II. Mr. L.M. Morgan, he's in Veterans Nursing Home at Humboldt. And Mr. Leland Starnes, he's here this morning. Mr. Starnes, would you stand? Thank you. Next was the Korean War. There were 54,296 people, Americans, killed and more than 100,000 wounded. The Korean War was short in time, but it was a lot of bloodshed. I was in Korea 2 years after the war was over. I didn't see people getting killed or bombs dropping or all that stuff. But everything, where you looked, was bombed out. Just building after building. But the worst thing I seen were little kids begging for food. It really got cold in Korea. And you'd see them little kids out by the fence begging for something to eat. They was about the same age as these little fellows you see run out, go to children's church. Just about the same age. There were kids they were kids that didn't have a thing in the world starting the Korean War. They were the victims. The victims of a war is always the ones that have to pay the price. This base I was on had fence probably 6 foot high, a little higher, and had barbed wire, that rolls of barbed wire keep them coming in. When you were out close to the fence, it was probably, like I said, 6 to 8 foot high. When you get up close to that fence, these kids would be out begging for food. We would throw K rations and C rations over the fence. If you ever eat K rations and C rations, they wasn't too good, was it? But they were so hungry, they'd eat. Like every kid that ever lived, I guess, they love candy. And them little kids would be there, and we'd throw candy bars over the fence. We'd get them in the carton and tear the carton open and take them out of the bar and just throw a whole handful. And they would just fight like heck over that candy. They liked Milky Way, and they liked Hershey bars, and they liked all the good candy bars. They loved all kinds of chewing gum. I remember they would be up against the fence, and them kids would be begging, hollering, "G.I., G.I., you got chewing gum? You got chewing gum?" And we'd have just 100 or more packs. We'd take it out of the pack and throw it over the fence. And some of you's ever been on farm and raised chicken, you remember how chickens would run after corn. That's the way they was. They was after that chewing gum. After the Korean War, then it was the Vietnam War. South Vietnam had 850,000 troops. The United States had 540,000 troops. South Korea had 50,000 troops. There were 300 to 400,000 Vietnamese killed during the war. The United States had 58,800 that was killed. 300 thousand were wounded. One of the men that was wounded in Vietnam is one of us. Charles Tanner, would you stand? I've heard his testimony, and I think we need to persuade him somehow how to give it some Sunday morning or Sunday night sometime. It was during the Vietnam War wasn't a popular war. People just wasn't sold on it, you know. They just wasn't sold on the war. It was a time of the hippies. Y'all all remember the hippies. The troops, I've always thought, though, if the United States had troops in other countries in war, I think we as Americans could back those men. But you see it now, people demonstrating against war. That's not all the war. The war in Iraq and Afghan. It started in 2001 to the present. On 9/11/2001, there were 2,500 to 3,000 killed. In the war, there has been 6,717 men and women killed. What do you think about America's future? If we don't get back to God, could all this be happening to us? We don't want to see, like the Russians, all these people killed. And more, we don't want to see the young kids killed. Instead of fighting a war with guns, we need to fight on our knees in prayer. Do we really think about what all these servicemen went through? You know, I've thought about it a lot while I was doing this. While you was on the battlefield, if you had a good buddy, and most of us did in the service, we had friends and we had buddies. If some of them got killed right beside you, how would you feel? I tell you, we need to do what Paul said in Ephesians 6. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against power, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil days, and have done all to stand. Stand therefore, having girded your waist with trust, having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having shod your feet with preparation of the gospel. Above all things, the shield of faith, with which you will be able to carry with you. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. Well, you listen to the news every night. You know, I do. I just wonder, sit there and wonder, what will America be like 10, 20 years from now? I think we really ought to think about that. So That's all I got. And maybe somebody got a little something out of it. I got a whole lot. Thank you.